this morning in the urgent question, the despotic terrorist regime, which has been illegally attacking commercial shipping in the Straits and attacking our allies, ranging from Bahrain, Kuwait, Omani ships and territory, while repressing its own people in the most brutal and unimaginable ways, they must be made to feel the consequences of their actions. And I want to put on record our solidarity with Oman following the outrageous breach of its sovereignty by Iran. We understand that Oman has agreed to work with Britain and France to ensure that its territorial waters remain safe. And last week, a joint statement with the French, Downing Street, said that they stand ready to deploy a wider multinational military mission to support freedom of navigation in the Straits. But what does this mean in practice? Will there be a deployment? What will be the scale of the deployment? What will it consist of, and over what timeframes? And how will we reassure our strategic and security partners in the region of our commitment so they don't think we've stepped back, particularly with the rising tide of attacks from Iran? And what opportunity will we have in this House to scrutinise and debate the government's plans? As the Foreign Secretary will know, as Defence Secretary, my good friend Ben Wallace invested millions into the development of cross-cutting autonomous mine hunters. And the Shadow Defence Secretary in this previous government also delivered Britain's first ever defence drone strategy in 2024, which emphasised the use of uncrewed drones in maritime domain, including for mine detection. Will either of these capabilities be deployed in the mission? Madam Deputy Speaker, it is vital that Britain has capabilities to operate in all theatres in the world. And of course, that requires cash now, which the current Labour administration are refusing to provide. Britain is already spending less of its GDP on defence than Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Norway, the United States, Denmark, Greece and Finland. How can we expect others to find more for defence when we are not leading by example? Because of this Labour government, in the words of the former Defence Secretary, has been unable and unwilling to provide the money that it needs to keep Britain safe and our defences safe. Our country is now facing a huge shortfall in years ahead. By the end of this decade, Britain will be nowhere near the 3% and barely ahead of where we are now, while all our allies, Madam Deputy Speaker, will continue to surge. Now, I don't need to remind the Foreign Secretary of the numbers, but Germany is set to spend 3.7% of GDP by 2030, Sweden 3.5%, and other countries too. And of course, there'll be a change of Labour leadership in the coming weeks. £4.7 billion has been left to Andy Burnham to find at his next budget. And there's no serious detail about the billions of so-called efficiency savings that this government has identified. As the Foreign Secretary's Polish counterpart, the Polish Foreign Minister, said of Britain, under Labour, you're spending something like 65 billion on defence and 360 billion on welfare. Lucky you. You must not feel any danger. In reality, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is prepared to plough billions into welfare, but shortchange in defence. We want to change that, and I just want to make that point to the Foreign Secretary again. Will she work with us to actually make progress on this? Because this is a serious time. Britain is under threat. We need to step up in a significant way. Now, the Foreign Secretary also mentioned Sudan and the absolutely horrific situation concerning El Obeid. We know that words are not enough. Action is needed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I agree with her on the need for the arms embargo to be extended, and the two warring parties must be pressed into a ceasefire.
Well done.
Foreign Secretary.
Can I thank the Shadow Foreign Secretary for her response and particularly her support for the commitments made at Ankara and the continuing condemnation of the Russian strikes. It has been an important part, I think, of the cross-party debates in this, not just in this House but across the country, that I think the whole country has stood united behind Ukraine and in solidarity with Ukraine, and long must that continue. She is right too that we will need to maintain the pressure on Russia. And we see that as being about increasing sanctions and continuing the pressure through sanctions and issues like maritime services bans, also continuing with our military support for Ukraine, both directly and in partnership with our European allies, including the loans for Ukraine as well that we are also continuing to support, and crucially energy infrastructure support and resilience, because Ukraine also needs the resilience to get through winter, because we know that is when Russia most heavily heavily targets the civilian population as well. And so we will continue to maintain that support. In fact, it's our commitment to the long-term future of Ukraine, which is why we have signed a 100-year partnership between the United Kingdom and Ukraine in the spirit of our solidarity. I also welcome her condemnation of Iran and its behaviour. I think it is telling that Iran, despite having signed a memorandum of understanding with the United States, seems to be continuing to persist in the view that somehow they have the right to control the Strait of Hormuz, which is an international shipping route, and also that they have the right to attack commercial ships in Omani waters. This is a violation of Oman's sovereignty as well as a violation of the law of the sea. And that is why we have been so strong in our condemnation, but also in seeking to mobilise countries from across the world to put pressure on Iran to get them to recognise the importance of the whole world's support for freedom of navigation and for the law of the sea, and frankly for getting the scale of support for freedom of navigation and for getting the global economy moving again as well. She raised the issue about defence investment, and she will understand that we are increasing the investment in defence at a rapid pace and at the steepest pace since the Cold War, and also have made commitments to go further. But I should just point out to her, it was her party that cut defence spending by 20%. And the Shadow Foreign Secretary says from a sedentary position that times have changed. She's right, times did change. Times changed when Russia invaded Crimea. That was the evidence that the post-Cold War peace dividend had gone. And yet, it took her 10 years to even recognise that defence spending needed to increase. For most of that period, under the...
Order. My constituents, and I'm certainly everybody's constituents, will be very interested in what the Foreign Secretary has got to say. Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For most of the period of that last period before the election, the level of defence spending was nearer 2% of GDP. That is just too low. And it's why we are increasing it, why we've already increased it from 2.3% to 2.7%, and why we have committed to go further. And that involves some difficult decisions, including on overseas development aid and also in other areas as well. But I hope the whole of the House will support that increased investment in defence, because ultimately it underpins our security, the security of our country and the security of our future.
Liam Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I very much welcome the Foreign Secretary's statement today. The alliance is growing stronger by the week. But what is also clear now is that national security rests on economic security. So can she update the House on what conversations she had about how the allies come together to build and enlarge an arsenal of democracy for the 21st century, where we collaborate on defence industrial policy and defence finance strategy on a wholly new scale that is fit for this new age of insecurity?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend makes a really important point, because the links now between our national security and our economic security are now closely intertwined. And that ranges from the fact that if our economic security, including through things like the Strait of Hormuz, is jeopardised, that has an impact on our national security as well, and particularly for supply chains for critical minerals, for example, that might be crucial to our defence. And also, as we increase the demand for and the procurement for the investment in defence, it's crucial that our supply chains can keep up and our defence industry collaboration across allies can keep up. It's why we had a specific meeting of foreign ministers at Ankara specifically about how we better collaborate and integrate aspects of our defence industry, and that is what supports tens of thousands of jobs here in the UK, but we need to do that in collaboration with other countries as well.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And on behalf of my colleague, I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement. As we've now come to expect of all major international summits, NATO's meeting in Ankara was taken over entirely by Donald Trump's tantrums and threats. He restated his claim that Greenland should become American. He threatened the withdrawal of all remaining US troops from Europe. And he once again lambasted allies for not joining his and Netanyahu's calamitous war in Iran, which has upended the world economy and worsened a spiralling cost of living crisis for millions across Britain. Deputy Madam Speaker, this is no way to conduct international diplomacy. So did the Prime Minister make it clear to Donald Trump that his threats against Greenland are totally unacceptable? There were some positive moments from this summit, however, and NATO allies reaffirmed support for Ukraine, and the Prime Minister announced plans for the development of a new deep strike capability with our European partners. But can the Secretary of State outline how exactly the UK will provide its share of the £37 billion of funding for that capability? Even before this new commitment, as has been pointed out, the government's own defence investment plan only delivered just over half of what military chiefs deem necessary for our national defence. And will the Minister, together with her colleagues in the Ministry of Defence, consider how defence bonds could be used rapidly to help support the UK's contribution to this initiative, bolster the confidence of our allies and send a clear signal to our adversaries? Have these plans also been drawn up together with the Ukrainians, who have shown with incredible effect how deep strike capability can be developed fast and much, much more cheaply than £37 billion? On defence funding, the Prime Minister also discussed the possibility for collective financing and procurement models as a critical way to generate cheaper loans for military programmes and support greater interoperability. Can the Minister update the House on whether any progress was made at the summit to bring together the existing Defence Security and Resilience Security Bank and our own multilateral defence mechanism into a single European rearmament bank? And finally, the Secretary of State mentions El Obeid in Sudan and the thousands of lives at risk now. The UK has the power to act. So will the Secretary of State now prescribe the RSF, as has just been done with the IRGC, and suspend all UK arms sales to the UAE, given its role in arming the RSF?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, let me thank the honourable member for his questions and range of issues. First of all, in terms of the areas of agreement and disagreement, of course, there will be areas where we continue to disagree with the President of the United States, where we have said so, including our continued support for the sovereignty of Greenland and Denmark, which we have always made clear. But that's also why we worked in NATO and now with the support of the United States for a new Arctic Sentry within NATO, on which the UK Carrier Strike Group is operating as a part of that. And that is an important way of having a multilateral and a shared defence of the High North, which is about protecting Canada and the United States and Norway and the western flank of Europe, including the United Kingdom and the whole of Europe as well. That is the way in which we approach Arctic security, and that has now the strong agreement from the United States, and I think is a reflection of the way we have worked to deal with those issues. On the $37 billion on the deep precision strike, we have allocated $3 billion over the first 4 years from the Defence Investment Plan, and that will help fund some of the work we are doing with Germany and also some separate work that we are doing with France and Italy as part of a series of programmes all about deep precision strike that we have brought European allies together on. He refers to the Defence Security and Resilience Bank and also the multilateral defence mechanism, and what he may have seen, the Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister put out a joint statement over the last couple of days to set out how we seek to work together to ensure that those initiatives, which do slightly different things but can be combined and collaborate together to ensure we get the best possible impact as well. And then finally, in terms of Sudan, we continue to raise the issue of arms flows and take immensely seriously the issue of arms flows. It's exactly why we want to extend the arms embargo and believe that needs to continue across the whole of Sudan. That's why I have raised this with the UAE, with Egypt and with Saudi, who are the members of the Quad, and why we will continue to pursue that. He raised the issue around prescription. He will know, obviously, those are matters for the Home Office, but we do believe that there should be a full arms embargo on Sudan.
Jim Dixon.
Thank
you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement and for the work she and the Prime Minister have done at the NATO summit. Can I register my huge concern and that of my constituents that the ceasefire between the US and Iran appears to be over at the moment due to the egregious breaches of Iran and obviously has now escalated with the US taking military action. Can I ask for reassurance that those who helped to bring about the first ceasefire, including the UK, working very closely behind the scenes with allies, that they will be doing everything to try to bring about a new ceasefire so that we can in the future get a deal which will lead into a permanent peace, which will be good for the region, but also much better for the UK and the world economy?
Foreign Secretary.
And I welcome my honourable friend's points because we do need to see an end to Iran's attacks in the Strait. They're attacks on commercial shipping, but crucially that means Iran has to give up this claim that they somehow have the right to control international shipping routes and Omani waters, because they do not. We want to see the return to talks for the ceasefire to be sustained, and also we have offered to support the talks, both the technical talks around preventing Iran developing a nuclear weapon and also the reopening of the Strait through our multilateral maritime mission.
Sir Edward Lee.
I agree with everything the Foreign Secretary said in her initial statement, particularly the point about the fact we're living in a more dangerous world than ever. But I also agreed, obviously, with the Shadow Foreign Secretary. The point is this, surely, that there's no point between us apportioning blame. We are where we are now in the most dangerous position we've ever been before. So will she take this thought away in her talks with the new Prime Minister and say that both front benches, the new Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, should cooperate in meeting our defence NATO commitments in full? No black holes, no creative accounting, and we should pay for it by curbing the spiralling welfare bill, which is out of control. It's a win-win situation. Defend the nation, get people off benefit dependency, work together to save our country.
Yeah. Foreign Secretary.
Well, I thank the Father of the House for his question. We, I think, do agree about the nature of the increasingly dangerous world that we live in and the importance of us being able to defend ourselves and to maintain our security. We have committed to reaching the 3.5% commitment around defence, but also that's part of a 5% commitment that was made to cover broader defence, security, intelligence. And he will also know that the UK invests substantially in our intelligence capabilities as well, which are unrivalled. And that's why if we combine that broader measure, the assessment is that we are already over 4% on the trajectory towards the 5% broader NATO figure. That is important as well. So in addition to continuing to increase our investment in defence, we also need to ensure that we're investing in that wider intelligence, resilience and wider defence issues as well. That's how we'll keep our country safe.
Alan Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement and for her focus on Sudan at the summit. The world has never been in a more dangerous place, with Russia playing a dangerous game in and around our waters and harassing our carrier strike group. But can I welcome the £70 billion pledged at Ankara for Ukraine? And can I ask the Foreign Secretary what difference that will make to Ukraine's ability to resist Russian aggression?
The Secretary.
Thank my honourable friend for his question, because this is both about the immediate support Ukraine needs, both in terms of its military capabilities, and we provide support, but to be honest, we also learn from Ukraine's phenomenal innovation and strength as well in the way in which they are using that investment and support, and it supports their resilience for the civilian resilience and the energy infrastructure resilience. And perhaps even most important of all, the fact of making that long-term commitment is also crucial to Ukraine's defence, because it is because Putin thinks he can outlast Ukraine and its friends that he continues and will not come to a peace agreement.
Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could the Foreign Secretary say anything about the bilateral discussions between President Trump and President Zelensky, and can she shed any light on the discussions they had about the United States sharing their Patriot missile production licenses with Ukraine, and what can the government do, apart from welcoming that, and I hope she will, to make sure, to facilitate that exchange and to make sure it happens, because it could be crucial.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can certainly tell the honourable member that we support what I think was a very positive bilateral discussions between President Trump and President Zelensky, and included a range of support that they discussed, and also the progress that Ukraine is making and the strength that Ukraine has shown. I don't have further details on the next steps, but we did strongly welcome the commitment that the US made and that the US President made in terms of the licences and Patriot missiles, but I don't have the details for the House.
Gordon McKee.
Speaker, can I welcome the Foreign Secretary's statement. Recent events have underlined, I think, the need for us to cooperate much more closely with our European allies and partners. So can I ask her what discussions at the summit she had with her European counterparts on joint procurement between British and European defence industries, which I think ultimately will make our country safer and stronger?
So my honourable friend makes a really important point here, because we know that, especially with some of the most advanced capabilities, actually no one country can do this alone. But also, if we want really effective interoperability, then actually doing joint procurement with our closest allies is hugely beneficial, and it helps our industries, defence industries and jobs as well. One of the best examples of that, I think, is our joint procurement with Norway on new frigates, where we are effectively procuring the same frigates for Norway and for the UK, so we will have full interoperability as well as our combined strength in the procurement process.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary rightly highlights the UK's unwavering commitment to our ally in Ukraine. Her Estonian counterpart recently said, Russia wages war not only with missiles but with narratives. With that in mind, last week I sent a letter to the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport about Masha and the Bear, a Russian children's TV show that's on ITVX and Netflix has recently picked up. Funding from that show makes its way back to the Russian state, funding Putin's illegal war. We've also recently seen the IOC allow Russia to potentially participate in the next Olympics, and Eurovision have said they may return to the stage. So what steps is she taking with UK counterparts, but also international counterparts, to make sure we stop allowing Russia to use the world stage to push its propaganda and its narratives?
Well, I agree with the honourable member about the importance of challenging Russia in every sphere, in the way in which they not only attempt to use different spheres for their narratives and for their misinformation, they have also used misinformation on an industrial scale to seek to undermine democracies as well. And it's why we have used sanctions in that regard too. He will know we have strongly condemned the IOC decision on the Olympics. That is one we strongly disagree with and believe is the wrong thing to do. And I will pass on the points that he has raised to the Culture Secretary as well.
Maureen de Jos.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm really pleased that the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister were able to discuss Sudan at the NATO summit, because it is the biggest humanitarian crisis that the world is facing. But I wonder whether she also had the opportunity to discuss the situation in Gaza and the West Bank, because it is coming up to nearly 2 years now since the ICJ gave their advisory opinion and recommended that all states refrain from entering into economic or trade dealings that support these illegal settlements. And during business questions this morning, the Leader of the House did confirm that these settlements are illegal. So does the Foreign Secretary agree that perhaps we should follow countries like our NATO ally, Spain, in giving full effect to our obligations under international law?
So I can tell him that I did take the opportunity to discuss with some of our allies and partners the situation now in both the West Bank and in Gaza. I am deeply worried that the 20-point plan for Gaza, which was hugely important and we supported and the whole world supported last year, is at risk of running into the ground. The humanitarian crisis there is not yet eased. And I'm also deeply worried about the expansion of settlements, illegal settlements in the West Bank, and also the increase in settler violence, some of which is effectively a settler terrorism that we are seeing as well, and is jeopardising the two-state solution that we strongly believe in. We are looking at what stronger measures that we can take in this area, including looking with allies, including in terms of restrictions on trade with illegal settlements, but also including with stronger sanctions regimes as well. And we will continue to work on those issues with partners. We need a two-state solution that supports the security of Palestinians and Israelis alike. It is the only way to ensure that.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I recognise the Foreign Secretary's personal commitment to Sudan, and I'm very pleased that she's shining a spotlight on El Obeid. But I also recognise how difficult it is to work closely with our Gulf allies on the situation in Iran, whilst at the same time having to condemn them for their activities behind the scenes in Sudan. But surely the lessons of Al-Fasha is that unless we take a robust approach with those Gulf allies, we are not going to be able to prevent another Al-Fasha in El Obeid.
Well, I agree with the Honourable Member about the importance of preventing another Al-Fasha, and that's exactly why not only did I raise the issue directly with a series of both European allies and with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the Prime Minister raised this with President Trump, and we have raised this across the board, and he also raised it with President Macron as well. We want concerted diplomacy from across our allies, but that does also have to be the pressure on all of those who have the potential to influence the warring parties. And some of those are countries that have influence, some of those are countries that are involved in arms flows. There are around 12 countries that we believe are involved in arms flows that are supporting the different warring parties. That's why we want the arms embargo to be extended, and it is why I can assure him I'm having intense discussions with a series of nations that all have potential influence in Sudan, and I will continue to shine a spotlight on what is happening.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, further to the Foreign Secretary's responses to previous questions about the Defence, Security and Resilience Bank and the multilateral defence mechanism, can she flesh out how in practical and maybe in financial terms the UK envisages these working more closely together?
So I welcome the question from my right honourable friend. I can tell her this work is underway and has a joint commitment from our Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister, who have been in parallel responsible for beginning these initiatives. The multilateral defence mechanism focuses mostly on the procurement side and on the joint procurement side. The Defence, Security and Resilience Bank focuses particularly on support for small and medium-sized businesses. So they are effectively complementary initiatives, and therefore we want to see those be able to operate together and to look at how we build a much stronger link between them and how we take those forward. That work is underway at the moment, and I'm sure we will provide her with regular updates.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Sorry, order. Can I just remind the honourable gentleman that you don't walk in front of another member when I am calling in. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. According to the Stockholm Institute, global arms expenditure has now reached $2.8 trillion, the biggest amount being the USA, Europe, Russia and China. At any time during the NATO summit, was there any strategic discussion about the way the world is spiralling out of control with massive levels of expenditure on armaments, increasing wars, cuts in overseas aid by almost every country, attacks on welfare budgets in every country as well. So we're going into a world increasingly at war with increasing poverty at home. I realise none of these issues are simple, but surely there needs to be some strategic look at what we're doing. Or is the history of the 21st century going to be how we allowed the world to burn and spiral into war while increasing poverty at home in every country?
Well, as I said to the honourable member, our security since the Second World War has very much depended on the NATO alliance, and that has always been a defensive alliance that has built its strength through deterrence, and deterrence is immensely important. When we reached the end of the Cold War, around 1990, then there was, at that point, a substantial peace dividend at that time, and many countries, including our own, saw reductions in investment in defence, and more money went into other things in that period. What we have seen, sadly, since, and we've seen it in Europe since Russia's invasion of Crimea, we have seen the end of that post-Cold War peace dividend. And when we see growing threats to our security, in order to maintain that defensive alliance, which is what NATO has always been, we have to make sure that NATO has the capabilities to respond to any threat that might come in our direction, because that is how we deter those threats, whether that be through our deep precision strike that we have been talking about, whether that be through other increased capabilities, whether that be through matching the technical capabilities that Ukraine has demonstrated through anti-drone warfare, and to ensure that we have those kinds of air defence capabilities as well. We have to ensure we have those capabilities so that we deter the threats against us and maintain our security. It is troubling that we live in a more dangerous world now, but we have to rise to that threat and ensure that we can keep our people safe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I say to the Foreign Secretary, it's always great to see her, and but it is convention in the House that when there's a NATO summit, it's actually the Prime Minister that comes to the House and gives the statement. And perhaps when she goes back to Downing Street, mind the Prime Minister, he still has 11 days as Prime Minister, and the country expects him to govern as Prime Minister for the next 11 days, and this House expects him to come to the House on important matters such as the NATO summit. On missile defence, can I ask what discussion she had with her counterparts on improving missile defence for Ukraine, whose hard-pressed civilian population are still being bombarded every single day, and in particular where there are not Patriot missile systems available either through cost or availability given their redeployment into the Middle East. Is it not the case that there are other systems in Japan, in South Korea, which could be used, and whilst there are some issues around the Japanese exporting some of that technology, and indeed the South Koreans, where there's a political will, a way can be found to help the Ukrainian civilian population?
So on that specific issue, I can tell him that there have been extensive discussions as part of the NATO summit particularly around air defences for Ukraine, and also the potential to mobilise a wide range of different partners and allies from across the world who may have other capabilities that could provide immediate and short-term support as well. So those discussions were underway. And I know he's not disappointed to see me at the dispatch box, of course. Let me just say, just in terms of the Prime Minister, that at the NATO summit, I saw him in a series of meetings, bilaterals, and in the main NATO Council as well, continually raising the importance of our 100% solidarity with Ukraine, also our support for NATO and our commitment to these long-term defence partnerships for the future, and also seeking to raise at the highest of levels with the issues around Sudan, which are about our values as well as about our interests. And I pay tribute to everything that the Prime Minister has done over the last 2 years to put the UK back on the world stage.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Having criticised successive coalition Conservative and Labour governments for inadequate defence spending, may I yet again remind the Foreign Secretary that during the 1980s we successfully came through the height of the Cold War by spending between 4 and 5% of GDP on defence, and that was without the creative accounting. But on a more positive note, did she detect herself what seems to have been a shift in the attitude of the American president towards the Ukraine conflict? Is this because he just wants, as always, to be on what he perceives to be the winning side, or is it a sign that the depredations of the killer in the Kremlin are finally getting through to the occupant of the White House?
Well, I pay tribute to the honourable member for being liberal in his criticisms of all governments. I will accept that. I think that the US assessment of what is happening is very much recognising Ukraine's strength and Ukraine's resilience, and the fact that despite all the initial expectations that Putin was going to win this war easily, in fact the opposite is the case. And also, I think as well, the recognition of some of the links between Russia and Iran and the shared technologies and support as well in terms of the kinds of security threats that we face. But I think most particularly just recognising the breadth of the Russian threats to NATO allies, but particularly their failings in Ukraine and the strength of Ukraine's response and the willingness to support Ukraine in that.
Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Scotland stands ready to play its full role in defence of Britain, with many fine young men and increasingly women in our forces, and also with a huge array of industrial companies working on defence contracts. But there is a problem, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that problem is the Scottish Executive, which, in a remarkable display of overreach, has blundered onto the world stage, and they refuse to put vital public funds into defence firms which have legitimate commercial relationships with our ally Israel. What can the government do about a fifth columnist First Minister, John Swinney, in Edinburgh, who is damaging British security and also thereby NATO as well?
Well, what I would say is that defence and foreign policy are rightly reserved matters, because this is about the security of the whole of the United Kingdom. Scotland plays a crucial role as part of that, as being part of not just our armed forces but crucial parts of our defence industry, and we must continue to support that.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for her statement and for the vast portions of positivity and good news that there is in it. Whilst the 70 billion Ukraine package and the 5% spending target by 2035 does sound impressive, our constituents want to know just how good these declarations translate into safety on the ground. Russia continues its brutal onslaught, and as the summit rightly points out, Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional aggression are incredibly worrying as well. So how will government ensure that all NATO countries are fully playing their part, that every pound coming from our taxpayers will be matched at the same stretch by fellow NATO countries and their taxpayers?
Well, I welcome the honourable member's question. I can assure him that the commitment to increasing investment in defence, both in each country's sovereign defence but also in our shared defence, was evident right around the NATO Council table from every country. I am sure that that will continue. NATO's strength has been the commitments from all allies working together, and that commitment is what I believe will make us strong into the future as well.
Could I take the Foreign Secretary's back to the reply she gave to the Father of the House when by including some other admittedly vital services, she managed to come to a figure of 4%, I think she said, spending on defence. Yeah. But the reality, as we know, is the fact that Europe is still heavily reliant on the US for its defence, and bearing in mind the President's recent comments, would she acknowledge that further increases are going to have to take place over the coming years? And it's an internal debate for government, of course, whether that comes from the welfare budget, as the Father of the House suggested, or elsewhere.
Yeah.
I do agree we need to go further. So the Defence Investment Plan has set out a plan which takes us from 2.3% up to 2.7%. We have made commitments to go to 3%, but then to go to 3.5% in terms of the core defence spending. And so, of course, we do need to go further. We need to ensure that as we increase the investment, we also increase our capabilities. We ensure that we expand our defence industry, and we do so collectively, and we do so with the most modern technology and capabilities. And also that we show leadership, because this is not just about investment, it's also about the crucial UK capabilities and leadership, which is what, as we work with our partners, is what keeps our people safe.
And that concludes the NATO statement. If I give the House a few moments for the front benches to shuffle along. Point of order, Bernard Jenkins.
I'm most grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker. During business questions, I mentioned the interests of council taxpayers in tendering district, and I probably should have drawn attention to the fact there is an entry on my the register for members' financial interests. I am a council taxpayer in tendering district.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his clarification on that, and it is now on the record. We now move to the statement on the Timms review. Minister.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on the Timms review of personal independence payment, PIP, to make it fair and fit for the future, both for disabled people who need it and for the taxpayer. Today, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government is publishing an interim report on behalf of the Review Steering Group. Copies will be in the libraries of both houses. We are committed to openness and transparency, so it sets out the evidence gathered so far and the emerging themes. This will inform the recommendations which will now be developed for the final report to be submitted to my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, this autumn. PIP was introduced more than a decade ago, but the benefit itself has never been fully reviewed. Since 2013, the number of people reporting a disability has increased significantly. Patterns of disability and ill health have changed, and the workplace and wider society have evolved. We've seen a sharp rise in disability and long-term health conditions among younger people, including in mental ill health. The number of people receiving PIP has risen considerably and is forecast to continue growing. Against that backdrop, we're taking a fresh look at whether a system introduced 13 years ago still reflects the realities of modern life, supports independent living and is sustainable for the long term. The Timms review is the first time the UK government has co-produced reforms on this scale. Our aim has been a review not just about disabled people, but shaped with disabled people. That means working together with disabled people, drawing on their lived experience. The review is led by 3 co-chairs, that's me, Sharon Brennan and Dr. Clinton Farquharson, and a steering group of 12, which we have recruited, almost all of whom have lived experience of disability or long-term ill health. The group represents a range of impairments and different parts of the country. But no single group can represent the full range of experiences of disability, so we've set up a wide programme of engagement with varied accessible opportunities for people with differing lived and learned experiences to get involved. The interim report, Madam Deputy Speaker, brings together the evidence we've heard so far. It includes a summary of findings from the call for evidence, which received over 38,000 responses, and an existing evidence pack provided by my department to the steering group as a starting point for further evidence gathering. It's the strongest evidence base ever assembled on PIP, on the assessment process and on the experiences of those who rely on it. The interim report presents a clear message from the steering group. PIP is hugely valued for managing the additional costs of disability, but its current design and delivery are no longer fit for purpose. The assessment for PIP is often described as stressful and dehumanising, and over 90% of those responding to the call for evidence reported the experience of the PIP assessment as a negative experience. PIP provides a lifeline for many, but the fear of losing it on reassessment can create serious barriers to participation in work, in community life, and in other everyday activities. That's the direct opposite of the intention, which has always been to support independence and participation. The report also highlights that the benefit hasn't kept up with wider changes since PIP was introduced. This work will sit alongside the Milburn Review into young people and work, looking at the factors behind rising economic inactivity amongst young people and how government can better support participation, opportunity and independence. The interim report sets out the next steps for the review. It outlines the evidence and engagement programme over the coming months and how the review will test emerging thinking and develop recommendations reflect the group's ambitions for radical reform and are credible, deliverable and grounded in experience. We're not looking here for quick fixes. Reform needs to be guided by the evidence to address the underlying problems in the system and to deliver lasting change. The government is committed to a fairer system which has the trust of both the public and the people who rely on it. We've introduced recording of health assessments by default. We're substantially increasing the proportion of face-to-face assessments up to 30%, reversing the sharp decline under the previous government, helping to improve trust, accuracy and confidence in the assessments. Our objective is to reform the system to work better for disabled people while ensuring it's sustainable for the long term so that support is there for future generations who will need it. The review has been tasked to develop recommendations that can be delivered within the Office for Budget Responsibilities forecast for future PIP spending. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to thank everybody who's contributed time, evidence and expertise so far to the steering group, including to my fellow co-chairs, Sharon Brennan and Dr Clinton Farquharson, for their support, their commitment and their determination, and crucially to the very large number of disabled people who've shared their experiences to help shape this work. This government is committed to helping remove unnecessary barriers that disabled people too often face. This groundbreaking review is only part of this work, but it's an important part. We want to support disabled people to play as full a part in society as possible, and I commend this statement to the House.
Minister Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Minister for advance copy of his statement. And I put on record my thanks to the 38,000 people and organisations who took part and have responded to the call for evidence. Because let's be honest how we got here. This review is not born out of principle, it was born out of panic. Last summer, the government brought forward £5 billion of welfare savings, yet 126 of their own members rebelled. Within days, ministers abandoned the lot. The Timms review is a fig leaf draped over that failure, a review commissioned not to fix the system, but to get the government through a difficult week. And a year on, what do we have? An interim report, not a decision, not a reform, a report about a report with the findings promised for the autumn and perhaps legislation at some later stage. Meanwhile, the welfare bill keeps rising. Spending on PIP alone is forecast to reach £43 billion a year by the end of this decade. Every month of drift is paid for by working people, and every month of uncertainty is endured by nearly 4 million claimants. Madam Deputy Speaker, we on this side accept that the system needs reforming. That's why last month we launched the Conservative Party's review of disability and sickness benefits. It's a root and branch review of a failing system, looking into who should get help, how they should be assessed, what form that should take, the conditionality of support, and how to control the level of overall spending. It asks much more fundamental sets of questions than this review covers. It sets out to make savings as well as build a better system. This government has now had 2 years, 1 abandoned bill, 2 reviews, and he has not delivered a single lasting reform. The official opposition's position is clear. We would restore face-to-face assessments as a default, because decisions of this consequence should not be made down the phone. We believe that people with milder health conditions are better served by treatment and support getting them into work than being signed off for a lifetime on welfare. We would restrict access to sickness and disability benefits for those without a long-term connection to this country, and we would bring the welfare bill down, because a welfare system that is unsustainable is no protection to those in genuine need. So let me press the Minister on a few points, because there was very little detail in his statement. Firstly, after 2 years of divot and delay, the government has finally accepted what we've been saying all along. The welfare system is urgent need of reform. Ministers boast about consulting nearly 40,000 people, yet they appear to have ignored the most important stakeholder of all, the British taxpayer. When will the government actually take decisive action to get the system back on track? Secondly, He told the Work and Pensions Committee in June that the review has the power to recommend reductions and that he had personally asked it to consider conditions such as anxiety, depression and neurodiverse conditions. Will the interim findings address whether PIP is the right benefit for those conditions, and will he tell the House today whether he is ruling them in or ruling them out? Yep. And thirdly, before this review began, we were told that spending would not rise beyond existing projections. Yet those projections already build in £43 billion of PIP spending by 2030. Wow. Does the Minister seriously believe that amounts to meaningful reform? Would it not be better for the review to focus on identifying savings and restoring the long-term sustainability of the welfare system rather than rubber stamping an ever-growing bill for taxpayers? And finally, the Milburn Review concluded that the PIP system is failing to engage young disabled people in a meaningful conversation about aspiration, challenges and the support they need. Yet the government's response appears to move precisely in the opposite direction, extending PIP award periods and reducing the frequency of contact between claimants and the system. Does the Minister accept that there is a fundamental contradiction between Alan Milburn's diagnosis of the problem and the government's proposed solution? Madam Deputy Speaker, welfare should be a safety net, never a way of life, and a government that cannot reform welfare cannot control spending. Disabled people deserve certainty, taxpayers deserve value. Yeah. The country cannot afford yet another year of dithering and delay, so I ask the Minister simply, when will the government stop reviewing and start reforming?
Yeah. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman has set out some trenchant criticisms of the system that his party set up and left behind. And the question, I think, in everybody's mind is, why didn't they do anything about it? They had 14 years and they've left the problems that he has referred to. The honourable gentleman should be apologising today to the House and for the system that the party he represents left behind. The biggest ever rise in the welfare bill was in their last year in government. We've heard previously that his party has a plan for £23 billion worth of welfare cuts, although nobody has any idea at all what those cuts will be. He didn't refer to that figure in his statement, so I'm not quite sure. Maybe they haven't now got a plan. He said that they are now going to review PIP, and I welcome his belated recognition of the value of a review. But I don't know whether that now means they haven't got a plan anymore, or they've thrown the plan away until they've carried out their review. He's expressed concern, rightly, about the rising costs of the system. The public are concerned about, and the public are right to be concerned about, and particularly the steep increase in the number of young people who are claiming. But we've set up the work to address that problem. His party abandoned those young people, the growing numbers who were applying for benefits. We will not be doing so. We're changing the question that the system is asking. We're providing the employment support, we're providing the youth guarantee to give young people the chance of a decent future. He complained about the small number of face-to-face assessments. Well, that was left behind directly by the previous government. Understandably, face-to-face assessments, we moved away from those, the system moved away from them during the pandemic, but they were never brought back. That was the problem. We are now increasing the proportion of face-to-face assessments. That's an important step and a positive one. His honourable friend, the Shadow Minister, did say when we were debating one of the measures upstairs to facilitate greater face-to-face assessment that it was a kind of nice to have rather than essential. We think that face-to-face assessments are key to rebuilding trust in this system, and that's why we're making the changes that we are. The system that his party left behind didn't work for disabled people, it didn't work for taxpayers. This review will bring forward proposals to fix the problems that they created.
I do apologise, I'm going to have to leave straight away to go and chair Westminster Hall, as I explained to you. Can I say to my right honourable friend, thank you for doing this work. It's a very challenging piece of work, and I think the theme of fairness for the people needing benefits and fairness for the taxpayer is right. I know I spoke to him briefly about the complaints from the Link Community Centre in my constituency, in Stradbrook, where they're saying there are people there with mental health conditions claiming PIP, who actually have got drug abuse and alcohol abuse conditions, and they're using PIP to fund those conditions. Or I can take them to Darnell, where I've complained about young lads in their 20s driving around in mobility cars, and someone in the community is paid to fill the forms in for them. On the other hand, so many constituents with really serious conditions who get turned down for PIP and can only get it if they struggle through the appeal system, sometimes without any help at all. So the system isn't fair to anyone at present. Could I commend him for his suggestions and just say, is he going to have a real look at the differences that people come to apply for PIP with and how they are properly responded to?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think we've now got an appointment in the diary to talk about the issues that he's just referred to, that he's raised about his constituency and his constituent who's drawn his attention to this. But I think he's right. The system at present does not work properly for disabled people, and neither does it give confidence to taxpayers that the funding is being well used. We're determined to turn things around and to be fair to both, and I'm grateful to his support for the efforts we're making.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the Minister and for everyone involved in this review for their hard work, and it is a difficult subject, so it's much appreciated. Today's report has confirmed that perhaps something all of us knew for many years, that the PIP is supposed to act as a lifeline, but is administered through a broken system. Disabled people say that the application process actively disincentivises them to stay in work and maintain an active social life. This is unfair on claimants, damaging for our economy, and should worry us all. People deserve far better. So we welcome this interim report and will engage constructively with the government to play our role in the delivery of genuine improvements to the system. We want to see a society where everyone can live independently and with dignity. We need the right support in place to ensure that disabled people and their carers can live their best possible lives, and the PIP system must be built around those principles. But we must also recognise the structural underlying challenges that the system operates in. In 2024 prices, spending on incapacity and disability benefits rose from £34 billion a year in 2019 to £51 billion a year in 2024 under the previous Conservative government. £34 billion to £51 billion. And those economically inactive due to long-term health issues also rose from 2.1 million to more than 2.8 million in the same period. The figure is stuck at similarly high levels now, and this is seriously worrying, and the UK is largely an outlier in this regard. And on current trends, the total bill for working age, sickness and disability benefits is projected to rise to 78 billion in 2030, so that's well more than double in 10 years. Managing these economic pressures is in an effective, fair and sustainable way is vital. So could the Minister expand a little bit on the work done to make sure the evidence gathered is representative? And could I ask the Minister if work is underway to address the root causes behind these challenges in a holistic way, looking at everything from employment support to mental health? And can the Minister update the House on progress towards merging PIP and universal credit incapacity benefit assessments?
Well, I'm grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the honourable gentleman for his support for this review and his tribute to those who put a great deal of work into it already and will be putting a lot more in between now and the autumn. And I think he's right to make the point both that the system is not working well for disabled people at the moment and the costs of it are rising rapidly to a degree which is of concern to many, and rightly, I think, of concern to taxpayers. He's right to highlight that this benefit, which is supposed to contribute to independence and participation, too often actually presents a barrier to doing that, because so many people are worried that when they get reassessed, if they're doing something, the DWP will come along and say, oh, so you didn't need your benefit after all then, and take it away. And so, there's very striking evidence of the scale of that concern about going to work or taking part in exercise or sport. There are significant barriers which the current system is presenting. We want to address those. But there are absolutely as well concerns about the rising costs. those we need to address as well. So all of those factors will be in the minds of the steering group as we progress with this review ahead of our final report in the autumn. What I would say to him is that the steering group, as I mentioned, is made up almost entirely of disabled people. But the concern about financial sustainability of this benefit is of great concern to them as well, because if it deemed to be not financially sustainable, then there's a risk to the future of it. We need this support to be present for the long term for the large number of people for whom it's vital.
Dave McHillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his work and look forward to welcoming him to Grey Eye Theatre in my constituency, which is an exemplar of how to support disabled people to work and fully participate. In the discussions he's had so far, is he looking at adaptive technology? Because money can be one of the barriers to living a full life, but sometimes there now are technologies that can be perhaps in place of some of the funding that's been available for people to buy things themselves. And has he having any discussions with the steering group on that issue?
Well, we're doing quite a lot of work in the department specifically on assistive technology. In fact, the Secretary of State was at a round table very recently with representatives of the tech industry. I think one of the problems is that the technology is moving on very rapidly, but a lot of people don't know about it. Even the technology that we've all got in our phones and so on, that's already available to us without any extra charge, people aren't aware of it. So we are doing quite a lot of work on this at the moment, and I am hoping that we'll be able to issue later this year a call for evidence on how to do a better job in exactly the areas that my right honourable friend has highlighted.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the right honourable member for his statement. What a shame he's only been asked to look at this now, when his government had 14 long years in opposition to work out what they wanted to do. Given that he acknowledges the system needs reform, as every new government acknowledges, will he accept that in today's world a system of cash payments to some people with conditions such as ADHD, half of the claimants are between the age of 16 to 24, is not what they need most? Indeed, some of them have no financial needs at all, and the money would be best saved, and can he confirm there will be savings, and some of it invested in better health and community services, some of it invested in technology, and some of it to incentivise businesses to go on and employ the 6 in 10 young people who are not in education, training or work?
Well, I think we can take the honourable member's question as a tacit recognition that 14 years the previous government should have done something to fix these problems. But the steering group is clear that provision of cash to meet the additional costs of disability is absolutely vital. And we're not going to be moving away from the importance of that. But I think there is a question about whether the process can also point people towards help that may well be valuable to them in addition to, or in some cases perhaps instead of, a cash payment, because there is help and support that people need, and that the process, I think, could help point people to. I mean, of course, one of the problems that we've had to contend with is the terrible NHS waiting lists that people have had to contend with, thankfully now being reduced. But the system may be able to point people to the right place in the health service. So we are looking at all of these issues, and we'll come back with recommendations on them in our final report.
Marcia de Cordova.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I firstly thank my right honourable friend for his statement, but also for welcome the direction of travel within which this review is going in. The PIP system, as we know, is not fit for purpose. Indeed, it has created much mistrust, much stress, worry, and more importantly, it has created a hostile environment for disabled people. At the recent APPG for Disability, which the Minister attended along with representatives from the steering group, we heard from disabled people themselves about their experiences and organisations including MENCAP and the RNIB, that the assessment and PIP does not truly reflect or recognise the lived experience of many disabled people. So as we move forward into this second phase of the review, can my honourable friend assure me that he will continue to have co-production at the heart of this process? Because not you, but the Minister should be commended for the work that he's doing in co-producing this review, because it's the first time the department has taken those steps, so we really can't take lessons from the party opposite. But can he reassure me that co-production will remain at the heart of this work?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can give my honourable friend that reassurance, and I do pay tribute to her work as chair of the all-party parliamentary group, and grateful to her for her welcome to us the other week. And she's absolutely right. I very much hope that people with sight impairments and others looking at this review will feel that the government has listened to points that have been made to the government for a long time. And I can give her the assurance that co-production will be at the heart of the rest of the work as well. It was, of course, a decision of this House that this review should be co-produced. We've worked very hard to ensure that we are properly co-producing it, and I think we are gaining the benefits of that approach. And that the outcome from this exercise will be significantly better because it is a co-produced review.
So Julian Lewis.
Does the review plan to look into the question of what happens when something goes wrong in the arrangements for a disabled person receiving PIP or indeed universal credit? This time last week, I raised with the Leader of the House at Business Questions the fact that my case-working team had been trying for 6 months to get an answer on behalf of someone who lost PIP and universal credit, and yet, although we had a holding letter in February, we have still had no substantive reply, and this lady is getting more and more desperate. We did write to the Minister on the 8th of June. I know he's been very busy, but he should be receiving a letter, if he hasn't already, from the Leader of the House. But when he deals with that individual case, will it perhaps serve as a guide as to what's needed more generally to be able to communicate on behalf of our constituents?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, I shall look out for his letter, and I hope he will receive a reply in short order. And he's right, the system needs to work well for people in order for them to be confident in it. One thing he may well welcome is the fact that we have just started recording by default the assessments for PIP, and the focus in the review is on PIP specifically. We've started recording the assessments by default, partly so that when something does go badly wrong, and his constituent's case may well be an example of that, we could look back at what happened in the assessment and make sure that that mistake doesn't happen again.
Denchi Anwara.
Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd also like to thank my right honourable friend for his work with disability groups as part of this review. As I saw during the Disability APPG Roundtable and also in the Roundtable in Newcastle, which I organised, the lived experience of those affected by disability must drive reforms of the disability benefit system. But the report does highlight that that lived experience is also shaped by the misinformation, disinformation and confusion around disability benefits as part of the wider public debate, which can lead to the demonisation of those with disabilities, and it can also lead to unrealistic assumptions and expectations in the communities more broadly. So what can he do as part of his review to address that misinformation, disinformation and confusion and ensure a stronger, more rigorous and better evidenced public debate?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very important point, and I think she's absolutely right. And certainly it's been very clear in our review the level of concern amongst disabled people about some of the misinformation that she refers to. We will be wanting to make sure that correct and clear information is provided to people, that there is clarity around the eligibility criteria for PIP and the assessment process, and I hope that is going to help. But I think there will need to be other efforts, and we'll be working with disabled people's organisations, with disability charities, I hope, to significantly improve the position.
Kirsty Blackman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a fundamental question here about what our priority is. Is our priority to reduce the bill? Is our priority to reduce the amount of money we're spending? Or is our priority to ensure that disabled people can access all of the human rights that the rest of us can access society, can be supported, we can recognise the extra costs of disability? What is the priority? The Conservatives are very clear their priority is to reduce the bill. Our priority is to ensure that disabled people can live as full, as pleasant, as excellent, as wonderful lives as possible. I appreciate the really hard work that's been put in by the team that's been involved in the co-production. Can I continue to encourage the Minister to talk to Social Security Scotland and our colleagues in the SNP government about their experiences of adult disability payment and the changes that have been implemented there, and whether they would make a positive difference to those claiming PIP?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, our objective, of course, must be both of the things that she's referred to. We do need to have a system that works well for disabled people, that helps to remove unnecessary barriers that too often hold disabled people back. But we do also need a system that has the confidence of taxpayers, and that is the objective for our review. We are certainly very interested in what's been happening in Scotland, the work of Social Security Scotland, and one of our expert evidence sessions forthcoming, we will be hearing from Adele Harris, who, as she knows, has recently undertaken a review of adult disability payment in Scotland. So we're very keen to monitor what's happened there.
Dr. Marie Tidball.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the review and thank disabled people who have shaped it. Last year, I was pleased the Minister accepted my amendment to the Universal Credit Bill at the dispatch box to ensure co-production with disabled people was put at the heart of the TIMS review before any future changes to PIP were brought forward. The rich and important findings today demonstrate why nothing about us without us is so crucial in shaping government disability policy. How does the Minister plan to ensure colleagues across his department, including Alan Milburn and Sir Charlie Mayfield, reviewing ways to close the employment gap for disabled people and young people with mental health problems, learn from the TIMS review to integrate the voices of disabled people? And will the Minister agree to come back to this House with the full findings of this report that ensure changes to PIP are also joined up with the findings of these two other reviews, so that there is strategic coherence across government policy in getting more disabled people into work?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very pleased to be able to pay tribute to my honourable friend for that amendment, which, as she rightly says, was what took us down the road of co-production, which I think has been a very fruitful avenue for the review. Central government has certainly not done co-production on this scale before. I'm not sure it's done co-production at all, actually, in the past, but we are undertaking this review in a thoroughly co-produced way, and it's been a very positive experience, including for the Department for Work and Pensions. And I think we are going to want to learn the lessons of this for future work. So one of the things we will be doing is evaluating this review so that those lessons can be properly documented and taken account of in the future. She's absolutely right. We need to be staying in touch with Sir Charlie Mayfield, the work of the Keep Britain Working Review, Alan Milburn's work that I've referred to, and I spoke to Alan the other day. We will be making sure that all of this work is taken together in connection, in contact with everybody. And I'm pleased that both Alan and Charlie Mayfield have been talking to disabled people's organisations to contribute to their work, and I know that will continue.
Andrew George.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Like my colleague, I welcome the broad direction of the review. I acknowledge, as others have referred to, that this is also in the context of some attempting to create a hostile environment. Hopefully, Camp Binface will deal with one source of that hostile environment in the weeks to come. But also, there's an issue of language as well, as the Minister, I think, acknowledges. And that is that we should use less the language of welfare benefits and dependency and more the language of investment in people, particularly investment in mental health services, if we can work with ministers in the Department of Health to ensure that people are supported before they need these benefits, but also investing in people so that their talents can be enjoyed in the workplace.
I think the Honourable Gentleman is right to highlight the importance of language. This is a topic that the organisation Turn to Us has been thinking about lately. One of the things that I'm pleased about is that my job title is Minister for Social Security. I think I'm the first minister to have Social Security in my job title since the abolition of the old Department for Social Security at the end of the 1990s. I think Social Security is a good term, and that's what this review is about delivering.
James Nash.
Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Minister for all the work he's done, especially on the co-production front, which has been so important to disabled communities. One of my constituents had his PIP disallowed on renewal over a late form. Reassessed, he then scored 0 points with no change to his condition, which was upheld on review. It was only at tribunal, where my team represented him, that he finally won the highest rate of daily living support, having gone 2 whole years without any help. What sort of reassurances can the Minister give me today that this type of dehumanising failure won't be seen under the new system?